Hello, my name is James Pywell and this is the 92 podcast. I'm on a quest to speak to one fan from each of the 92 football teams that make up the Premier League, the Championship, League One and League Two. Each episode I'll shine the spotlight on a different club, talking to their fans, testing their knowledge and learning what it's like to be a supporter of their team and what makes supporting their club different from the rest. In this episode the focus is on the Black Cats, Sunderland.
What you'll find being a Sunderland fan is you'll experience some pretty bad lows, but it tends to make the highs all the more sweeter when they come round type thing. It's almost like if you're taking the lows when the highs come, you'll appreciate them more. You will have rival fans who mock Sunderland, but I think that's just the nature of English football. I've been in plenty of away ends and heard away ends at the Stadium of Light shout, "We saw you crying" on the Netflix, etc. Which is probably true.
Now, Sunderland are a team that I actually do know a lot of things about. I went to university in the North East and had a season ticket for the Black Cats too when they were still in the Premier League. I saw plenty of highs and lows, including a brilliant Fabio Borini strike against rivals Newcastle. I witnessed the great cup run that led to the Capital One Cup final trip to Wembley against Man City, and I witnessed firsthand the raw passion that the city of Sunderland has for its football team. Now, to assist me in educating the world about Sunderland is Black Cats fan Phil, who joins me on this episode to share his experiences and memories and to perhaps even teach me a few things I didn't know either. Hello Phil, welcome to 92 Podcast.
Hi James, thanks for having us. A bit of pressure on the education side. I hadn't realised you knew that much about Sunderland already, but no, great, thanks for having us.
No worries. So I mentioned in the intro there that you're a proper Sunderland fan. How long have you supported them?
All my life, basically, as soon as I came out the mother's womb. That's probably the best way of describing it. Born into it from a family point of view. Both sides of the family, Sunderland mad. So yeah, it's pretty much been a lifetime of supporting them from a very young age, been going to games. And yeah, I've been a season ticket holder now. What am I now, 29? Realising how old I am as I say that, as I'm thinking about the years. Yeah, I've been a season ticket holder since I was about 9 or 10. And before that was still going to games, you know, where I could without one with my family. So yeah, it's just been a forever association basically.
What was it that got you into football in the first place?
I think first and foremost, as I say, kind of alluding back to my family, my dad is crazy about Sunderland. Like, he's probably as crazy about it as I am, which is where probably it's all came from. Just the environment I was in, as I say, because both sides of the family were so interested in Sunderland, that obviously kind of created that intrigue from a young age and want to find out about it. But I would say I really started to get a love for it probably about the age of like 5 or 6, something like that, you know, maybe 6 or 7, when you're starting to kind of just, you like football, but you start to kind of gauge a little bit what's happening and who the players are and those types of different things. So yeah, I've pretty much, for as long as I can remember, it's been my main interest, and yeah, Sunderland's just been a forever present, really.
So we'll come on to the current season in a little while, but it's been a bit of a roller coaster being a Sunderland fan in recent years, hasn't it? How would you describe it?
That's putting it mildly, James. Yeah, it's. I mean, the last few years have been a roller coaster. I would have said the entire time of supporting Sunderland's a roller coaster. There's so many highs and lows, but yeah, in particular, the last few years have been of an extreme nature. I mean, kind of going back from the start, I mean, I'd probably, as I say, kind of gauging my understanding and getting a real understanding for it. I kind of started really gauging what was going on around the time we moved to the Stadium of Light in the late 90s, the emergence of Kevin Phillips. And it was a really good time, to be honest. And I always argue that Sunderland took advantage of my childhood naivety, because for the first few years of supporting Sunderland, we were really good. So in the back of your mind, you're thinking, oh, this is brilliant, this. And then by the time it had come to reality that we weren't as good as what we thought we were, I was too sucked into it to have any alternative. The one thing I'd say with Sunderland is we are a team that, you know, traditionally in the 90s and the noughties were very up and down, Championship, the Premier League. We had a couple of years in the Premier League where we had a couple of 7th place finishes, but in the main, we've generally looked to stay up in the Premier League or looked to get promoted out the Championship. What happened in the last few years is we'd actually managed 10 years in the Premier League in the noughties. Sorry, not in the noughties, in the 10s. And that, you know, it was a consistent amount of years at the top level, which we hadn't had for a long time. And when we've got relegated, we've obviously got relegated 2 years on the bounce, and the club was just in an awful mess. We had an owner in Ellis Short who just, I think he put a lot of money into the club, to be fair to him, He does get a lot of criticism, but he did put a lot of money into the club. The problem with Ellis Short was, from the outside looking in anyway, it certainly looked like he put his trust in people spending that money who basically let him down big style. And it got to the point where we got into a ridiculous amount of debt, and it got to the point where he just couldn't spend any more money. So when we got to the Championship, we literally just had this team that was just the worst team I've ever seen in all the years of following Sunderland. I'd grown up with my dad always saying, if I'd whinged on about Sunderland, it's not as bad as when Sunderland went down to the old third division, which is obviously equivalent to League One now. Had that for years. I don't get that anymore now, because that was the worst season by a mile. And then Stuart Donald coming in when we went down to League One. Initially, there was some hope there. I think a lot of us, including myself, kind of got sucked into believing his interests were, from a footballing perspective, to take us to the next level. He was, in fairness to him, quite honest and said he could only take the club so far before he'd need a buyer. But it became evident pretty quick that he didn't have the sufficient funds to even facilitate owning Sunderland in the period of time he suggested he could do something with us. So that again created a problem. And it's been a bit of a shock to Sunderland fans, I think. Our third season in League One now, if you take into account, obviously, the pandemic cut the second season short, of course, but it's been a big shock. Yeah, I think as I speak today, we've got a new owner in Kirill Dreyfus. We've got Lee Johnson, who's came in. We're on a cracking run. Things, I would say, probably in the last 2 months have really started to be positive again, and that positive mood within the club has really started progressing again. But before that, we have had a dark cloud over the club for a long time.
There's definitely been an optimism shift in the last couple of months, and ever since obviously the new owner came in. But I think the point about Stuart Donald is important as well, because obviously Sunderland is a unique club in the fact that it had a Netflix documentary series about it, so everybody got to see a lot more about the club than what they perhaps usually would. Did you watch it? What did you think about it as a Sunderland fan?
I did watch it. I've got a balanced opinion on it. From a fan perspective, I think there's one side of the club that it shows. Certainly in the first series, I think it shows the club and the fans in a very good light. I think it shows you, in terms of the background of the club and some of the staff in the background, especially there was the kitchen staff and there was the guys working in the ticket office, etc. I mean, in that respect, I think it really shows a cracking image of the club. It really kind of reflects well and reflects on the reality of, the passion there is there, both internally within the club, people who are genuine Sunderland fans who work for the club, who want us to do the best we possibly can, but also, shows you the fans and the commitment of the fans as well. That side of it, I didn't mind so much. But yeah, I mean, just alluding to that season I've just mentioned in the Championship in 2017-2018, the fact that we did a worldwide documentary of all the seasons we could have picked, we picked that season. I watched that series once and I've not been able to watch it again. Sometimes on Netflix you think, there's not much to watch, I'll watch this again. I struggle. And with the second series, I didn't enjoy the second series at all. I basically, besides the fact that it showed the Charlton game and the playoff final in the last minute, every single time I watch that to this day, not so much on Netflix because I've only watched it the once, but if I watch it on anything or if it comes up to this day, it still churns away at me. But I felt like that second series was very much the Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven show, and it got away from what the first series was about, albeit the team was terrible. The first series was very much all about the club, the fans, the city, the community. The second series just felt like it felt, Charlie Methven, people have turned around and said it's like Ricky Gervais when he was in The Office. It was farcical, to be honest. And the timing of that series coming out was about a year after, obviously, all those events took place, and fans were beginning to get frustrated with Methven and Donald by this point anyways. And there was stuff that we didn't even know about, which became evident on the series, such as the Will Grigg transfer. In fairness to Donald, I wasn't complaining when we signed Will Grigg. At that level, he had a good record. It was a lot of money, but in the back of your mind as a fan, in the moment, you think to yourself, well, if he scores the goals, if he gets us promoted. But obviously that didn't happen. In hindsight, it's a beautiful thing. But when you actually watch the nature of those transfer negotiations and how he just flippantly, without any rationale, around it just kept throwing numbers at Wigan. I mean, Wigan must have been laughing their head off. And the fact that he hasn't even done that well at Sunderland just makes it even worse. What I would say, though, is from a worldwide point of view, again, I think it's really shown Sunderland in a good light. You will have rival fans who mock Sunderland, but I think that's just the nature of English football. I've been in plenty of away ends and heard away ends at the Stadium of Light shout, "We saw you crying" on the Netflix, etc. Which is probably true. For example, I work in international trade, so I actually speak to people overseas quite a lot. And when you end up speaking to them and you have a bit of crack with them and say, "Oh, I'm from, the Northeast. Oh, do you like football? Who do you support?" The first thing a lot of them turn around and say, which does shock me, it is quite common. I've had people from like Sweden and like America, and I even had someone in South Africa, and they go, "Oh yeah, Netflix," and you think, "By God!" And when you realise the audience that it's gripped, and it makes you wonder with the likes of Kirill Dreyfus. I'm sure he hasn't just bought the club because he's seen it on Netflix, but it makes you wonder if these types of people have more of awareness about who we are as a club, the potential of us. Because that's the thing. I mean, the guys who made the Netflix are a group of Sunderland fans, Fullwell 73, the production company. And they're quite, I mean, they do some massive projects. I believe they do the Late Late Show with James Corden in America. I mean, they're not, it wasn't just kind of, we'll do Sunderland. I mean, the people who were doing it knew about the club, knew about the potential. And there is a 49,000 seat stadium there. There is a massive fan base, and I know it's a broken record about North East football, and people say it's the hotbed of football. But you know yourself, James. You've sat in it. When it's going well, you really won't get a better bunch of football fans who'll back you to the hilt.
See, that's a very good point as well. One thing that's synonymous with Sunderland is the Roker Roar. Obviously, that originated at Roker Park. Do you think that atmosphere is translated to the Stadium of Light?
I think in the early days, I mean, I will say, with Roker Park, I mean, Roker Park shut down in '97, so I'll have been 6 when Roker Park shut down. So I'm not going to pretend I was there when Montgomery was saving penalties in the FA Cup final or anything. But what I would say is certainly in the early days of the Stadium of Light, the atmosphere was electric, and it, there was no concerns from what I remember anyway, and from my memories of going to Stadium of Light, late '90s, early '90s, when I think we won Division 1, the Championship now, with record points, 105 points. We had Kevin Phillips emerging. The next year, Kevin Phillips wins the European Golden Boot. We finished 7th. We then go and finish 7th the next season. Those years, which were the first years of the stadium, I mean, it was absolutely electric. And then obviously, like a lot of football clubs, success obviously can only be maintained for so long, and we did drop off a little bit. But yeah, in the main, I would say it depends who you speak to. I've spoke to people from a generation from Roker Park who to this day say they still wish they were at Roker Park. But I've been at the Stadium of Light on some days, like, some of the derby wins, as you alluded to, with the Barini day. But like Chelsea at home under Allardyce when we won 3-2. I mean, the roof ripped off the place. It was absolutely electric. And again, I'm not even exaggerating. It really was some atmosphere. We've had some England games in that stadium as well, like England versus Turkey, which was quite a cracking atmosphere. There's a quote from Gary Neville after that Turkey game saying it was one of the best atmospheres he's ever played in. Albeit that was an England game, it just kind of tells you the noise that you can generate in that stadium.
Absolutely. Obviously, like you said as well, the atmosphere at the Stadium of Light it's electric when they're doing well, but when they're doing not so well, the atmosphere can change rather quickly, can't it?
Yeah, it's no medium, that's for sure. Yeah, as Sunderland fans, I think, it's a good and a bad thing, but what you'll find being a Sunderland fan is you'll experience some pretty bad lows, but it tends to make the highs all the more sweeter when they come round type thing. It's almost like if you're taking the lows when the highs come, you'll appreciate them more. I mean, over the years, especially, when we were getting relegated from the Championship and getting relegated from the Premier League, we do, I will admit, we do get on the team's back quite a lot. Do I think it's as bad as people make out externally? Probably not, no. I think you get a lot of footballers who are very keen to, use that as an excuse. I think this season's just proved it's perhaps not as toxic as people make out, because certainly when Phil Parkinson was in charge this season and we couldn't hit a barn door bar Charlie Wyke, you couldn't blame it on the fans then, because we even had Charlie Methven try and insinuate that the fans were an issue at one point. But that proved to be the case, because in the first half of the season we still struggled and we weren't there. So I don't think we are a negative impact on the players to the point where I think they can't perform. And I think a professional footballer anyway, if I'm honest, albeit I know the humans, I still would like to think a professional footballer would have the mindset where they can play within certain atmospheres. But yeah, it can be, if things aren't going well, it's the same for, the North East in general. I think it sounds corny, and I know it does, but it is genuinely true. There is that passion for the football club that people do genuinely just get frustrated and just genuinely want that success so much, and when it doesn't come, the frustration spills out.
I think for me as well, part of the frustration is the fact that the away fans are above the home fans in one end of the ground. That also adds to the atmosphere as well, doesn't it? So when Sunderland are losing, you've got the away fans above your head and you can just shout abuse at them. And that in a way kind of helps spur the lads on the pitch as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. That I remember when they changed because the away fans used to be what's now called the Roker end. It's Sunderland, which is kind of like the main kind of singing stand, if you like. Now, that was originally where the away fans were. And I always remember we had Martin O'Neill as manager, and we were in the FA Cup quarter-final replay in 2012 against Everton. And in the FA Cup games, obviously, you allowed a bigger allocation for away fans. I remember Everton brought loads of fans. And I was in the East Stand, and usually, I mean, the away fans, even when they were in that stand, were relatively quite far away. But I mean, the Everton fans were right up next to us. The atmosphere they generated as an away fan, and I know it from following Sunderland away, there is that extra, right, we're away from home, come on, type thing. And I actually felt like it was an advantage to Everton that night that they were so close to the pitch and I had all those fans. And lo and behold, the next season, all the fans are up the top, which I didn't find a coincidence, if I'm honest. Again, there's pros and cons to that. As you say, when things are going well, you've got all the Sunderland fans surrounding the pitch. And, there is some positives there. But I've no doubt you'll probably speak to some Sunderland fans, and as you say, that toxic element, I bet sometimes I wish there was some blooming away fans and they were them that wouldn't get as much stick. Again, I kind of sit on the fence again, not to sound like a politician, I kind of sit on the fence again with them being so high up because, as I say, when it's going well and you take that atmosphere away from the away fans, it's good. But, I mean, I remember it happened twice within the space of 3 weeks in our first season in League One, where two teams who really have it in for us is Portsmouth and Coventry. The Portsmouth one, I think they've genuinely just kind of realised they're never going to play Southampton again for years, and we play in red and white or something like that. And with Coventry, there is a bit of history there back and forth, but within the space of 2 or 3 weeks, both away fans threw flares from the top of the stand into the home end. And don't get me wrong, that can happen if they're down the bottom as well, but it's probably not as. It wouldn't happen as frequently, and they probably wouldn't get away with it as easily. So there's that element I'm not mad on. My preference would be to stick them in a corner, have them down the bottom where ultimately, they're down the bottom and they're near their own players, but what it probably will do is because they're so close to the home fans down the bottom, it probably spur the home fans on a little bit to kind of sharpen up the atmosphere a little bit as well. And yeah, that would probably be my preference. Stick them in a corner so they're not behind the goal, so they're not, kind of right behind our goalkeeper or anything like that, but they're just in a corner somewhere. That would be my preference.
So thinking back over your entire time supporting Sunderland, who are some of your favourite players that you've seen don a Sunderland shirt?
Without hesitation, Kevin Phillips is my favourite player of all time. As I say, I've always been a Sunderland fan, but I don't pretend to know about Sunderland when I was 3-4 year old type thing. I probably had a top, but I couldn't tell you much that was going on. So when I obviously started establishing a real understanding for what was going on, it was really about the time Kevin Phillips joined the club. The bloke's an absolute legend. He comes up the region quite a lot to do talkings and stuff like that. And I've seen him on a few times where after talkings, you've seen him out in Durham or you've seen him out in Sunderland. And I mean, people just buying pints from him, people wanting to get pictures with him like grown men. He's just an absolute legend. I mean, you've got to think as well, when he initially signed for us the first couple of years in the Championship, he was just scoring goals for fun. And nowadays, I don't think he would have been able to stay with us. Someone would have offered serious money for him. And we're quite lucky that we had him in the era that we did, where it was a lot easier to hold on to those types of players When nowadays, I think if a player like that was performing like that for Sunderland, someone would just snap them up, cut the fingers, give them money that you can't refuse, and that's that. But that first season in the Premier League, I mean, European Golden Boot for Sunderland. I mean, you think nowadays, it doesn't. It's Messi and Ronaldo on tap, isn't it? Every year Ronaldo's won it, Messi's won it, Ronaldo. I mean, that puts it into context how big an achievement that was. He wasn't playing in any of the European competitions. You know, he was playing for Sunderland. He wasn't really he was playing with footballers who weren't on the same level is kind of like the usual winners of this Golden Boot by any means. And I really do think sometimes Kevin Phillips doesn't actually. I think a lot of people kind of know Kevin Phillips was a top goal scorer, and he did it for a long time. He had a really long career, but I sometimes don't think he actually gets the credit he deserves for that season. And Euro 2000, you know, I think for a lot of Sunderland fans, it was a bitter pill to swallow that he didn't get 1 minute. He just won the European Golden Boot, and he didn't get on the pitch for England in Euro 2000, and we got knocked out the group stages. And Kevin Keegan being manager, I'm sure Kevin Keegan would have put him on. I don't think he would have jeopardised his job because he played for Sunderland or anything. But there is that element where you sit there and you think, is there some kind of snobbery because he plays for Sunderland? He didn't get in the England team. But, you know, I'm saying that at the same time, I'm happy he stuck with us, and maybe if he had done well for England, we wouldn't have held on to him for as long. I mean, I don't know how long you've got, James. I could name a few players, but the others which come to mind is Jermaine Defoe scored a load of goals for us, massive goals for us. The goal he scored against Newcastle. You know, I say it's against Newcastle, but it wasn't even just the fact it was against Newcastle. It is the best goal I've seen live at this stage of my life personally. Just the ball just projected off his foot, and you just see Tim Krul just jump for it. He wouldn't have gotten near it in a month for Sundays. Doesn't matter how high he jumped. It was just a brilliant goal, and the atmosphere that day and the goal with it. I mean, obviously he was crying on the pitch and everything, but just some of the goals he scored, and you know, kind of the way he took the club and really embraced it. And I guess as well, obviously, it goes without saying that, you know, with the period of time where Bradley Lowry was with the club and regularly coming onto the pitch, and I think even just from a human point of view, the way kind of, you know, supported Bradley, I think was fantastic and was just testament to the fella, to be honest. So from a footballing point of view, I'm just a general, you know, human point of view. I just think the bloke's first class. If I could name one more, I could name a few more, but you don't want your podcast to last for 3 hours. But another one's actually Julio Arca. I loved Julio Arca growing up. He was about 18, 19 when he came to Sunderland. Could barely speak a word of English, moved from Argentina. I remember his debut. It was on a Tuesday night against West Ham at home, and he scored on his debut. But the lad had that South American flair, and he was a real cult hero for Sunderland. Especially he dipped off a little bit. He started off really well, and then he dipped off a little bit when we were struggling in the early noughties in the Premier League, and then he kind of re-emerged under McCarthy in the Championship. And again, he just at that level, he was just taking the mickey out of some of the players he was playing against, and proper cult hero, I would say. And to this day, I mean, in the main, I think he's always kind of stayed in the North East. He was at Berra for a bit. He was at South Shields for a bit. I think his family, have links to Sunderland, that type of thing. And again, just another example of a bloke who moved from South America, couldn't speak a word of English, and really embraced the area and took it for what it was, you know, a proper kind of hero around the place.
So those are some of your preferred players, some of your favourite players. The natural question next to ask is, are there any players that you kind of wish didn't pull on a Sunderland shirt? I mean, one for me would be Josie Altidore. I hated watching him.
God, I said how much time do you have about the favourite players? Do you know what? I could go on forever. And before the 2017-28 championship season, I could have named you a few players. But to be fair, take your pick from that season. It was awful, honestly, absolutely awful. I can't put into words how bad that season was. I mean, I'm just going to say some off the top of my head, and I will miss some out because there's so many, but Lee Camp, Jack Rodwell, you know, you mentioned Josie there. Josie Altidore was poor, but compared to some of these lads that were playing in this championship team, I mean, my God, James Vaughan's another one. In fact, I can't stand James Vaughan. James Vaughan had the gall to actually, when he did eventually get the ball in the back of the net, which took a blooming lifetime as it was, he scored a goal from about a yard out away at Burton, who were the only team worse than us in that league that season, ran up to the away fans, cupping his ears and basically, you know, giving it what for, as if to be like, oh, what you say now, and you're thinking, oh, come off it, mate. Like we're in like December or whatever it was. You've literally like not scored a goal. You're absolutely terrible, and you're gonna have the goal to act as if you're like the Billy Big. I'll watch the French, but like going on as if he's like. And then when he left as well, just like on social media, he's always had a dig at us. He's been very bitter about it. And you just kind of think to yourself, like, who on God's blue earth do you think you are? So they're the ones that spring to mind. I will have missed some out. But they're the ones that spring to mind.
I completely had put Jack Rodwell's name at the back of my head after the whole debacle with him. That was ridiculous.
Do you know what? I'm a realist. I'm not going to be naive enough to think, at the end of the day, like we're doing this podcast and you speak to football fans, and our prerogative as football fans is that we, want the club to do well. And I'm not kind of naive enough to realise that some players won't necessarily have that aligned kind of passion for it. And at the end of the day, it's no different me turning up to work and ultimately I've got a living to make and I've got to look at interests in that perspective. So Rodwell's been given a contract, and whoever's given that contract, and this goes back to the Ellis Short example, and whoever Ellis Short's been put his trust in to sort these contracts out, put it in Rodwell's contract that he didn't have a relegation clause in his contract where the rest of the players did, which was mad because we'd been staying up by the skin of our teeth for about 3-4 years on the bounce. In that respect, you can't really blame Rodwell. In a sense, you can't blame Rodwell. It's not his fault the contract was the way it was. What I would say is there does become a period of time where, okay, so he doesn't want to leave the club, he's on good wages, he's got a contract, but try and make yourself available. Like on that Netflix series, I mean, he got done like a kipper when there was microphones in the background, and I don't think he was aware, and he just basically didn't want to bother. And you talk about football mercenaries, and sometimes it's warranted and sometimes it's not, but I mean, he is the definition of a football mercenary. And I was reading something the other day because it's quite shockingly that he's at Sheffield United in the Premier League now. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't remember him ever kicking a ball for Sheffield United either.
No, I think he's made like 1 or 2 sub appearances in like the 80th minute or something.
I tell you what, his agent, it must be one of the best agents in the country. How he keeps getting a job in football, I've no idea. Honestly, he is a footballer mercenary. There will people who will argue and turn around and say to me, well, look, Phil, he's making money out of it, blah, 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 blah. And if that's his prerogative. But it doesn't sit right with me personally.
So we're going to move on to talking about managers now. Sunderland, like a lot of other teams, have had somewhat of a revolving door system when it comes to managers in recent years. So we're going to play one of our mini games where we'll see how far you can go naming managers from the present gaffer Lee Johnson working backwards. How do you think you can do on this one?
I'll try my best. I'm fairly confident. I'll not put too much pressure on myself. I'll modestly say I hope I do well.
So we'll start with Lee Johnson. Who was the manager before that?
It was Phil Parkinson.
And before that?
It was Jack Ross. Who was before Ross? It was Chris Coleman. Before Chris Coleman, it was... Are we including caretakers in this or just permanent managers?
We're not including caretakers, no.
Okay. I'm just, I've got to watch out for these things, So, do you want me just to keep going?
Just reel them off, see how far you can get.
Okay, so Simon Grayson. And then before Simon Grayson, it was David Moyes. Before Moisey, it was Allardyce. Before Allardyce, it was Advocat. Before Advocat, it was Poirier. Before Poirier, it was Di Canio. Before Di Canio, it was O'Neill. Before O'Neill, it was Bruce. Before Bruce, it was Sprazier. I could keep going here, by the way. Before Sprazier, it was Keane. Before Keane, I want to say it was Quinn, but I don't know whether that's classed as a caretaker capacity because he was managing chairman, but I think he always had the intention of taking over. So was it technically Quinn? Technically, it was McCarthy. Ball was caretaker in between that. Before McCarthy, it was Wilkinson, Reid. And this is where you're challenging me now because I kind of came into the Peter Reid stage. So I am trying to think before Peter Reid. I'm going to take a stab at Malcolm Crosby.
No.
To be fair, I'm all right with that because I as I say, my kind of introduction at Sunderland was Peter Reid, so I'm not too bad with. I'm happy with that. That's not too bad. Who was it before Peter Reid?
Mick Buxton.
Nick Buxton, right? I wouldn't have got that, but me dad will be giving us a clip round here, no doubt for that. But never mind.
So let's move on to the current manager then, Lee Johnson. What was your thoughts on the appointment of him?
we've had that many appointments that you're always in the back of your mind kind of think, right, this could be good, but I'm just going to take a step back and see how he does it first before you gauge too much of an opinion. What I would say about Johnson is, my initial thoughts were, because he basically took the job and went straight down to the dugout and managed a Wigan game, even though he'd not even took a training session, which was quite hands-on. And we lost the game, which was, it was really poor because Wigan have been struggling all season. But it was his interview after the game, which actually, I think I said at the time, I'm probably being naive, being a Sunderland fan in the back of mind. You always think I'm being too positive here, I'm going to get knocked back a bit. But just the way he was speaking, he had his outlook, you could just tell, even when we lost a few games at the start under him, you could see the way he was trying to play. And it was something that we hadn't done since we've been down in League One. It was this attitude of like, you know what, we're going to go teams. We're going to, a lot of these League One defences, and I mean that with all the respect in the world, but a lot of these teams in League One, the defenders aren't the likes who can play it out from the back. And if you high press these teams and catch them out, and we have done in some games since, we're catching teams out and getting goals, and just that high press football that he's got us playing. It's so refreshing after Phil Parkinson. Phil Parkinson just had us playing a style of football that was just diabolical, if I can be completely honest to the bloke. It was just, it's just been a real refreshing outlook on how he sets out the team and wants us to perform and to say, do you know what, we're going to go out and we're going to go teams. And that's been reflected in the form that we've had. It's been reflected in the form of Charlie Wyke scoring so many goals. He's set the team out to the point where Charlie Wyke's just picking goals up for fun. And this is a bloke who, before this season, was struggling for confidence, could barely get a goal. And, I'm one of these where, with caution, I'm very happy with him at the moment and certainly can't complain. But, very optimistic.
Charlie Wyke's another interesting one, isn't it? You said there that he struggled for goals before this season. He only had 5 in the entirety of last season in League One. This year he's got 22. So that goes to show the impact that Lee Johnson has had, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in fairness to Wyke, he had been picking up a bit under Parkinson anyway. He'd done a lot better than what he'd done the season before, even under Parkinson. Yeah. But then under Johnson, he's just took it to another level. I always say with Sunderland, if I have a negative opinion on them, I'm always happy to be proven wrong. It's not like where if I have an opinion and something, then I'm going to be like, oh, I look like a bit of a mug here. No one enjoys the taste of humble pie more than me when it comes to Sunderland, if it's in a good way. And with Wyke, I think at the start, admittedly, I probably did have a bit of patience for him. He started off and he got quite a bad injury, which I think set him back a little bit. But he just always looked really unconfident. I mean, I'm no psychologist, but I used to watch him, just his shoulders, his body language. He always looked like he was like quite unconfident. And I think he was one of these where if he got a bit of stick off the fans, I think it maybe affected him a little bit. I can't speak for him. That's just an external opinion. But this season, he just looks happier as a person when you watch him. His enthusiasm, the way he's kind of playing, and even when he's like scoring, he just looks like he just looks like a happier bloke, to be honest, in general. But his gameplay in general, just his movement, you can tell just by the way he's playing that the confidence is coming out and the goals are coming, and he's done fantastic. But I wouldn't lie. There was a few people who I think had lost patience with him before this season, and I don't think anyone's complaining with him now. I think you can, to a point, you can say Johnson is the reason we are performing so well. But I think, before Johnson came in, you've got to give Wyke the credit, and you'd arguably say without Wyke's goals, we wouldn't be in the promotion picture even now, both during Johnson's tenure and before Johnson came in. So we've got a lot to thank him for this season, to be fair.
It's definitely looking up for Sunderland at the moment, isn't it? If Sunderland win their 2 games in hand, they will be top of the League One table. Did you see that happening at the start of the season, if you're honest?
I'll be honest with you, James. We lost to Shrewsbury in February, and after the Shrewsbury game, I had my doubts. Yeah, I think the nature of League One is if you can go on a run like we have done, you can really kind of steamroll your way up the league. And yeah, I have to admit, I didn't see it coming, but I've been pleasantly surprised. I think some of the additions Johnson's brought in as well. We've signed Jordan Jones on loan from Rangers, and he's just a cut above at this level. Some of the balls he's been putting into Wyke have been brilliant. And then, there's another topic of conversation. Aidan McGeady's back playing, in Phil Parkinson. I mean, what Phil Parkinson was thinking not playing Aidan McGeady. I mean, if it was an internal matter and, he's the manager and he's dropped him and he's shown him who's boss, I get that to an extent. but don't cut your nose off to spite your own face. He's the best player in that league by a country mile. And Johnson just bringing him in, that's made a hell of a difference as well. So I think the additions coming in really, really help. Sanderson at the back as well, who we've got on loan from Wolves. Because that's the other thing which has coincided with the form, which has been crazy. You would argue that Bailey Wright and Jordan Willis, our two regular centre-backs, are two of our best players. And they've both been injured. And we've had, at one point, Max Power, centre midfielder, playing at right back. Luke O'Nien, right back or centre midfielder, playing as centre back. With Dion Sanderson, who's, I think he's 20-year-old, on loan from Wolves. But they've been phenomenal as well, which has really helped. Sanderson is one to watch out for. Honestly, I don't want to kind of exaggerate on this one. I'm not saying he's going to captain England or anything like that, but he will be one that will end up playing in the Premier League for Wolves, if not Wolves and someone else. He's got a lot about him for a 20-year-old kid.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. So, how would you sum up how the season has gone so far?
At this stage, I'm very content, and we just need to do what's required of us. As you said, we've got those games in hand. It's in our hands. If we do what we're meant to do, we'll get promoted. But we all know following Sunderland, it's never as simple as that. But in terms of the overall season, it's been topsy turvy. We're winning games at the start under Parkinson, but unconvincingly, and we were probably getting away with it a little bit. And then we got found out, and we were really struggling a bit, and we were losing to teams that. We've actually probably lost to more teams down the bottom of the league than we have the top, ironically. I think you would probably say the first half, if we're saying we're in the second half of the season, the first half of the season was a real lack of consistency, which under Johnson now we seem to have got. And that's been the difference. We seem to have had that consistency now. And we're pushing on. So, yeah, it's in our hands. If we do what we're meant to do, we'll get promoted. But I say that with caution because... Sunderland really are one of those football clubs that they kind of work your hopes up and then out of nowhere you come crashing back down. So I say that with caution.
Absolutely. I think you're right to be cautious. So with the Championship hopefully in Sunderland's sights, what changes do you think will need to be made to make that step back up?
I think in reality, it probably does sound a bit harsh because a lot of the lads who are playing at the moment, I think, are really pulling up trays at the moment. But I think the reality is I think we will need an injection of players if we go into the Championship. One of the things which will be interesting whether we go up or don't go up this season is we've got, I can't remember the number of players now, but we've got loads of players out of contract this summer. And Johnson's kind of alluded to that and said, the best way to get a contract is get us promoted. So it's probably working in our favour because you've got a lot of people who are playing for the careers at Sunderland. Probably works in our favour a little bit. So I think there's a lot of players who probably, if we were to go to the Championship, as harsh as it may sound, we'll probably not renew the contracts and we'll probably get rid. And because we've, got Kirill Drivus, who's came in, who brings an injection of money into the club, I think we do need a blend of maintaining, some of the players that we've got. But yeah, a bit of Championship experience I think will be needed initially, just to kind of keep us on the straight and narrow, I think.
So let's think about heading to a game. Obviously, we're still in the middle of this national lockdown, but hopefully the end is in sight soon. For me, when I was going to Sunderland matches, I religiously had chips and gravy from one of the food vans afterwards. It was the perfect way to either, lift your spirits back up after a loss or help to celebrate a decent performance. What about you? Is there a specific place you go to before the games, or is there a staple food you have to indulge in? What's your match day experience like?
There's a bit of a mix, to be honest. So I do like a pint before and after the game. So you've got the Colliery Tavern, which is near the stadium, which we sometimes dip into for a pint. It's interesting because with the home games, I go with my family, and then with away games, depending, I sometimes go with my family, I sometimes go with my mates. So sometimes that's a bit dependent. It's the same with the home games. I kind of mix it up. Sometimes I meet the lads in the town centre, and we go for a few pints that way on. But yeah, pint. I tend to like a pint of Star of Pramen at the game. They do pint of Star of Pramen. They've got the big, I don't know if since you were last at Sunderland, James, but they've got the big hotel now near the ground as well, and do pint of Star of Pramen in there. But yeah, to be honest, there's no set location because I mix it up quite a lot. Sometimes I meet the lads in town. Sometimes I go near the stadium with my family. So there's no set ritual of that. Food-wise, I love a chicken balti pie. Chicken balti pie is always quite nice. Or pink slice. Can't go wrong with a pink slice as well, which is a good Sunderland delicacy as well.
When we are allowed back into games, what is probably the one thing that you've missed that you're most looking forward to seeing, other than obviously the football?
The day out in general, from a social point of view, really, because as I say, it's a big thing, really, because as I've just kind of said there, it's a real mix for me, Sometimes I'm with my mates, and it's a good way of like all the lads getting together. Also, as well, it's a good way for us to go out with the family, and we go to the game as well. And you always bump into familiar faces, people who you wouldn't bump into really, or have an excuse to bump into unless you were going to the match. So there's that element of it as well. And I think, one of the things about supporting any football team, not just Sunderland, is a lot of the time, if Sunderland are doing well, you're desperate for Sunderland to do well. So when I say it's a bonus, it's not just a bonus. You always want them to do well. But what makes up for Sunderland perhaps not delivering sometimes is the fact that you've still had a cracking day out. You've had a few pints. You've had a look out. It's a big. It's not just the kind of 90 minutes. It's the afternoon. It's the evening. Sometimes you'll go out after the game. You'll have a night out straight off the bat after a game. There's so many different variances. I mean, I miss the away games so much. Again, sometimes with the family, sometimes with my mates. I actually the last away game I went to just before the lockdown. It was literally just weeks before the lockdown, was when Coventry, I think they still are playing at Birmingham City's ground actually. I think they still play there. But it was on Sky on the Sunday morning. So a few of the lads, we'd like booked a Airbnb in Birmingham and had like a big day/night out in Birmingham. Then had like the match on the Sunday, driven back on the Sunday night. And that's what it is, you can make a weekend of these games. You can really kind of make some really cracking memories, and that's probably what I miss about it more than anything.
So to round off the podcast then, what I always do is get people to pitch their team. So if you've got somebody who's, for example, relatively new to football and they're trying to find a football team to support, how would you pitch Sunderland to them?
I think you alluded to it at the start. If you like a roller coaster ride, you will experience some extreme lows. But the beautiful thing about supporting Sunderland is you do get some extreme lows. But when you get the highs, they're extreme highs as a consequence. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that's what, I particularly love about it. I don't particularly enjoy the extreme lows, don't get me wrong. But as opposed to, say, following a Man City or a Man United or a Liverpool where it's just constant success, you really appreciate the highs, and when they come round, they're really special. It's like I know it's just the Papa John's trophy, and I know some people will say it's just a Papa John's trophy, but it was a massive shame we weren't at Wembley for that, because if we were, and I mean it's been brilliant weekends even when we've lost down there, to be honest. If we'd won and we'd been down Wembley, it would have just been epic. And that's the thing, you just appreciate the highs so much when they come round, and they do come round. You have to be patient. But they do come round, and when they do, there's nothing better.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, a trophy is a trophy.
Yeah, that's it. But I mean, not even just the trophy, just in general. Like Man United away, winning on penalties, semi-final of the League Cup to get to Wembley. You sit there and you think to yourself, this is what makes the Buries away in the League Cup under Niall Quinn, the kind of Rotherham's away that you go to when you're not doing so well. This is what makes it all worth it. This is what it is. It really makes you appreciate the highs so much more.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Phil, for taking the time to come onto the podcast and talking to us. Good luck to Sunderland for the rest of the season. Obviously, I have my allegiances with Sunderland too, so I do hope that they get promoted this season.
Yeah, thanks very much, James. I've really enjoyed it, and for your sake also, I hope Grimsby do well to the end of the season too.
Yeah, we don't talk about that one. I'm not too confident about Grimsby, but got to be optimistic, haven't we?
We'll see. Got to keep the faith.
Thanks again to Phil for talking to us, and of course thank you for listening. If you'd like to help me on my quest to speak to at least one fan from each of the clubs in the 92 and talk all about your club, you can find us on Twitter at the 92 podcast or email us the92podcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the 92 podcast so that you don't miss an episode. You can also support the podcast via our Acast supporter page. There's a link to that in the episode description. Thank you to Sunil, our guest from the Leicester City episode, who has already supported the podcast with a donation. You don't have to pay or donate to listen to the podcast, but any contributions are always greatly appreciated. Next time, I'll be talking to another fan from another club in the 92. See you then.